I'm John Thompson. I'm the Catskill Regional Invasive Species Partnership Coordinator, and welcome to this is the second CRISP virtual partners meeting, or partners virtual meeting. I guess the partners aren't virtual, the meeting is. So I appreciate you guys all being here. We have a really packed agenda. I'll just go over it briefly. We still have some people that are coming on, I think, but I'll give a few updates to start with, and then we have Chris VanMaaren from DC to update us on what's going on with the Northern Snakehead and the Upper Delaware River. Tom Allgaier is going to give us updates on Spotted Lanternfly, Asian giant hornets, and those unsolicited seed packets that were being mailed. Meredith Taylor is going to just chat about the glyphosate ban on state land that's on the governor's desk, I think, now. And then we have some time for partner updates at the end. If anybody has any other updates, we have a little bit of time. That anybody that's not on the agenda, we have a little bit of time at the end of the agenda for that. Maybe we could go around and everybody could give a brief introduction of themselves, just their name and where you work, your job title, maybe. So I'm John Thompson. I'm the Catskill Regional Invasive Species Partnership Coordinator. I'm at the Catskill Center, and I'll hit on all the names as we go through, but the next person I'll go to is Dan Snyder.
Hi, I'm Dan. I work at CRISP as the Field Projects Manager.
Jody Hoyt.
Jody Hoyt. I'm with Trout Unlimited, the Ashoka Papakan Watershed chapter, and I'm retired, so I'm just an interested party here.
Great, thanks for being here. Ezra Schwartzberg.
Hi there. Hi there, Ezra Schwartzberg from Adirondack Research up in Saranac Lake.
Thanks, Ezra. Andy Reinman.
Andy Reinman. I'm an assistant professor at the City University of New York Advanced Science Research Center and also at Hunter College.
Thanks, Andy. Brenda Miller.
Hi, everyone. Brenda Miller, CC Cornell Cooperative Extension in Sullivan County, the Environment and Natural Resources Program Manager.
Carrie Marshner.
Hi, I'm Carrie Marshner. I'm with the New York State Hemlock Initiative at Cornell University.
Catherine Scalda. Are you there, Catherine?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm with Delaware County Soil and Water Conservation District. I'm the Catskill Streams Buffer Initiative Program Coordinator.
Thanks. Connor Young.
Hi, I'm Connor Young. I'm with Cornell Cooperative Extension for Columbia and Greene Counties, and I'm the team leader for agriculture and natural resources and climate change and the environment.
Thanks. Jeff O'Hanley.
Hi, I'm Jeff O'Handley, Program Director for the Otsego County Conservation Association.
Thanks. Jennifer Dean.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Dean. I'm with the New York Natural Heritage Program and the IMAP Invasive Project.
Thanks, Jennifer. Jinsen Dai? I'm sorry, butchering your name. Are you there? Jinsen?
Yes, I am. Yeah, that's
How do you pronounce your name? I'm sorry.
Jianxin.
Great. And where are you from?
I'm from New York State DOT at Albany. I'm a landscape architect.
Oh, great. Thanks for joining us. Let's see, the names are sorting around, so if I miss anybody, we'll have a chance at the end. Chris Gilbert.
Hi, this is Chris Gilbert. I'm with the Department of Transportation in Region 9.
Thanks, Chris.
I'm also a landscape architect.
Right. Thanks, Chris. Meg Wilkinson.
Sorry, I'm so used to, I do Zoom some and I do WebEx some, and the mute is in a different place on those two different platforms.
I know what you mean. Yes.
This is Meg Wilkinson. I'm with the New York Natural Heritage Program and the IMAP Invasive project. And John, if you would add me to your updates at the end, I'd love to let this crowd know of a few upcoming events as well as some resources.
Great. I'll do that. Thanks, Meg. Meredith Taylor.
I'm Meredith Taylor with New York City Department of Environmental Protection, working in the upstate watershed, and I'm the invasive species biologist.
Thanks, Meredith. Molly Hassett.
Hi, everyone. This is Molly Hassett. I work for the Department of Environmental Conservation out of Albany on invasive species, and I'm the response and management coordinator out there. Thank you.
Thanks. Peter Woodward. Peter?
John, he typed a note in there. The New York Party in Gilboa. No
video, no mic.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not seeing the chat. Okay. Sorry, Peter. What was that again? I can't see the chat at the moment.
Peter Woodward Forrester, New York Power Authority, Gilboa, New York.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about that, Peter. Shannon Salento.
Hi, I'm Shannon Salento. I'm the Land Use and Resources Specialist with the Upper Delaware Council.
Great, thanks. Stephen Pearson.
Stephen Pearson. I'm here with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. I'm a research scientist focused on aquatic invasive species within the Bureau of Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Your audio is a little bit chopped up, but yeah, I think we could pretty much hear what you said. Thanks, Stephen. Did I miss anyone?
John, this is Chris VanMaaren. I'm on the line from New York State DEC, Bureau of Fisheries.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. Yeah. I don't see, I think you're
I'm not on the Zoom, I'm just on the phone. So.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, I see you now. I think you're the only one on the phone that I could see. So if there's no one else, then we could move into the agenda. Again, I want to start off with some crisp updates, but since we have a packed agenda, I'll try to be brief, but show all the great work that Dan's been doing, especially. For Chris, we've removed about 4,000 mile-a-minute stems across 7 sites. Dan remarked that stems in Woodstock are down significantly, and the number of stems in Skinner's Falls are slightly down. He's also been working on removing black jet bead, and he's doing work on the Japanese angelica tree infestations that we have. For giant hogweed stems, we found stems at 2 of the 8 sites visited, and a total of 192 stems were removed. There's one site where we're not able to get permission to do removals, so we couldn't do removals at that site this year. But Dan's been working on hogweed since 2014 and has really made an impact on the population of giant hogweed in the Crisp region. So it's been great that we're making progress on that species. And this summer we worked with the Catskill Center's Catskill Strike team. They continued their surveys and removals that they started last year. They worked at 14 different sites. I don't have updated numbers, and Dan might be able to jump in with some other numbers, but I think they surveyed over 800 acres and did removals over 12 acres. They're focused mostly on the Catskill DEC campgrounds. So they did a great job, and they've, believe it or not, finished up for the summer. So that's great that we have them to work with in the last few years, and hopefully next year. I'll just mention a couple events that we'll put up on our website. I'll be doing a presentation at the Delaware River Watershed Forum on September 17th at 2:30 p.m. And there's a Doug Tallamy lecture that the Woodstock Pollinator Pathway will be hosting on October 7th at 7 p.m. And Dan's been working with them a lot and has developed a map. I think they have over 104 people signed up for the Woodstock Pollinator Pathway to connect wildlife habitat in people's backyards through Woodstock and beyond. So they're really growing, so that's been great. So next we'll, oops. Next on the agenda, we have Chris VanMaaren from DEC, and I have your slide up, Chris. If you want to give your update on the Northern Snakehead and the Upper Delaware River, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So the sign, the image that's up is a sign that was produced for some Susquehanna outreach, and we're going to update this sign a bit with different contact information. We're going to change the heading to be more PC given today's environment, but so, I mean, it's just a sign that's going to go up at various access points. There aren't too many, well, I don't know if there's any bowfin really. We do have record of there being bowfin in the Delaware. So the fish that was caught back in July was in Calicoon, the snake that was caught, I should say. There was another fish caught down near Port Jervis not too long ago. So we're just starting to find them in the border waters. The sign, you know, is trying to make sure that people identify them correctly and then notify us. The New York State rule is that you cannot release them. So if you were to catch one through angling, you're required to dispatch of the fish. You know, you're allowed to fillet it and eat it, but you're not allowed to release it. And of course, you know, what we're trying to prevent is the spread. They actually are a pretty popular game fish. They're, you know, like in the Potomac, et cetera, down where they've taken more of a strong foothold. There's quite a few, you know, few anglers that target them, and they're, you know, a good eating fish. So, you know, we're concerned that, you know, there could be, you know, some targeting and potential spread. So, you know, this outreach hopefully will at least let people know that that's not allowed. So besides the outreach for the signs, we did a press release. We're working with, you know, Pennsylvania and the National Park Service to get the word out. You know, hopefully people will notify us. You know, that sign that you see on the screen is going to have my contact information. You know, conversely, they can reach out to PA or the Park Service as well. We're going to try to actually get out and do some sampling. Not that we're going to be able to do a ton of sampling, but we're going to try to figure out sort of the extent of their range, you know, how far they've gotten up into the system. We're going to be working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to do some eDNA sampling as well in the process. Their summertime habitat preference is what you typically identify with as far as vegetated backwaters. You know, that's what they require for spawning, but that's not to say that they can't utilize other habitats throughout the year. We're not really sure, quite frankly, if they'll continue to pursue going further up in this system. They're capable, and the cold water isn't necessarily going to be a deterrent. You know, a lot of this, you know, it's kind of a nebulous thing to identify or understand, because it's, you know, it's how any sort of species does sort of their assessment. It's like a bioenergetics kind of calculation that's not obviously conscious, but it's something that they have to, you know, they sort of work through. You know, if they find a ton of forage and it doesn't cost them a ton of energy to catch that, you know, they might continue to pursue going up into, you know, different habitats. Again, though, they'll have to be associated with backwater areas, and, you know, proximity to that, I don't know. I mean, they may range, you know, a fair bit from those spawning habitats, you know, non-spawning periods, but then you know, they'll need to find that again, you know, as it gets towards summer. And, you know, if you look at the Delaware, there's not a ton of those backwaters. The spot that the fish was caught was really fairly small. And it's basically a high flow channel that's, you know, doesn't receive a lot of high flow. As such, it's vegetated and fairly warm. There are, you know, a smattering of those kind of pockets as you go further up. We're going to try to pick, you know, a handful of them to sample. But they're not fairly common. I mean, in the main stem itself doesn't have a ton of quality habitat for them. I don't think that they would spawn in the main stem. There's definitely some pooled areas that they might choose to hang out in outside of spawning period. So we're going to try to just sort of get a general assessment as to what, you know, where they're at now, and then probably work with some applicants for different grants to come up with ideas related to research that can be done to assess, you know, how far they may move up into the system, you know, some diet studies, etc. We don't have any plans of trying to do an eradication. It's really not practical. You know, the fish that obviously that we would collect during any sort of sampling wouldn't be released, but we're not targeting, you know, an eradication methodology. So that's about all I have as far as an update there. I don't know if anybody has any quick questions on that.
Sorry, Chris, I have a question that came up actually yesterday. There was an email that came into the Catskill Center, or I think it might have been a response to a Facebook post or something, but someone asked if they can eat them, and it sounds like from what you said that people could take fillets, but you're asking people to kill them and to keep the fish so that you may be able to identify them later on. Is that correct? Is that the right thing that we should tell them?
That's correct. I mean, we might not try to actually collect the fish, but we, you know, like to have that option if it's a questionable fish as far as identification, and or if we're trying to do some genetic analysis. But I'm not saying that I'm going to collect every fish that somebody keeps, but we're asking people to keep them just in case.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, they can take the fillets.
Do other people have questions?
Just a quick question. Is there going to be a website created for this infestation, or is there anything going online to point people to more information?
I mean, it's both PA and New York have their IMAP invasive kind of equivalent there, so that I think that those records will be kept on that database. I think that that's updated on the web. I haven't checked to confirm that, but I believe that that is sort of the venue for people to identify the range.
We did put some more information on our website, Meredith, and it has the fact sheet on snakefish from DC, and we're directing people to the DC website for more information.
One of the other things I wanted to sort of add is, you know, as they go further up into the trout waters, you know, that area, as you probably all recognize, is you know, sort of a marquee fishery for trout. I mean, it's a destination fishery, and I've been trying to minimize panic, so to speak. I don't want this to be like, you know, everybody and their brother just thinking that this is the end of the world for trout, because it's likely not. So just to keep that in mind, as far as, you know, any sort of discussions you may have with the public, you know, we're trying to do our due diligence to assess the impacts and to, you know, let people know what's going on. But at this point, we don't have reason to believe that it's going to have a significant impact. I mean, there may be a, you know, a small impact to the trout fishery, but we don't have a huge reason to think that it's going to be significant. Right now, we have, you know, an excess of recruitment in the system as far as, you know, young of the year production. So it would take quite a bit of predation to really put a dent in it.
Chris, the other question I would have is just, I think as far as I know, the last couple reports are the first reports I've heard of northern snakeheads here, but do you think that they've been here and haven't been detected?
Potentially. I don't know, you know, how often those kind of backwaters are angled. They're likely not targeted too much, but I mean, the fish from Calicoon was actually caught by a guide. I think he was focusing on smallmouth. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, they've been downstream for a while, so
right.
You know, there's potential that, you know, in very low densities, they could have been here, you know, more than just this past year.
Mm-hmm. Right. Do people have other questions about the northern snakehead for Chris?
Hi, this is Jennifer from the Heritage Program, and I just wanted to chime in and mention that we do have snakehead fish on IMAP invasives and the data that we have so far from DEC. So far, it's set as a confidential species, so when you record it into the system, it won't show you that data that you just reported, but it's triggering the email alerts for the DEC fisheries folks that need to see it, and the Invasive Species Coordination Unit. We are working with them to see if we can figure out a way to set that data that once it's confirmed is publicly viewable. So hopefully that'll happen in the next few days, and you'll be able to see that data pop up once it's confirmed.
Chris, I do have another question about this sign. Were you expecting to put them up?
We're gonna, I mean, at least on any sort of access points in New York, PA, I think they're putting up a sign, and Park Service maybe putting, I think maybe actually the PA is advocating for the Park Service to put signs up on their side. So yeah, we're trying to get our sign shop to change up the details on this sign, and then we're going to get it out hopefully this month.
Great. Okay, does anyone have anything else to add to that? I appreciate that update. This is really important to know what's going on with this fish, and I appreciate you calling in, Chris, to give us this update. Are there any more questions? Or anything else anybody would like to add to this conversation? I don't hear anything, and I can't see the chat at the moment. If there's something there, let me know. But otherwise, we could move on to next on the agenda. We have Tom Allgaier. Tom is the Invasive Species Coordinator at the Division of Plant Industry for the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets. He's here to talk about spotted lanternfly, Asian giant hornets, and unsolicited seed packets.
Thanks, John. Trying to figure out I took my video off so I could share the screen, but
Okay.
I don't see the way to.
Let me double check. You should be able to
Speak review
share
maybe?
now.
Is Alt-S is a shortcut for it?
Say it again.
It says you can press Alt-S to share your screen.
Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
You can see that? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, thanks.
I don't know who that was, but thank you very much.
Oh, that sounded like Meredith. Thanks,
Thank you,
Meredith.
No problem.
There we go. All right, I think most of you know me. I'm Tom Allgaier, the Invasive Species Coordinator with New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets. Three of the things that I've been working on most recently, mostly for the last few months, has been Spotted Lanternfly. That's kind of kicked up a notch in the last day or two. As I am now the section chief on the incident response to finding Spotted Lanternfly downstate on Staten Island, and the continuing survey in other other areas in lower New York. I've also been tasked with addressing issues and reports of unsolicited seed that have been shipped to New York, and Asian giant hornet reports as well. So I'll concentrate on Spotted Lanternfly for the moment. So Spotted Lanternfly, most of you know it's not native to the U.S., certainly not to New York. It's a plant hopper native to China and Southeast Asia. It was first discovered in PA and has spread to multiple states since then. It uses its mouth parts. It's a piercing, sucking mouth part where it draws sap. It doesn't really suck sap, it just kind of filters through. But it draws sap from plants, and it attacks about 70 different species of plants that we know of. One of the preferred hosts is tree of heaven, or Alanthus. But the reason why it's an agricultural concern and also a forest issue, it attacks grapes, hops, apples, maples, walnuts, sumac, oaks, pines, and also I did mention maples, but so it's a wide palette of food that it goes after. Some of the impacts, you can see here photos of it feeding on grapes and apples. It doesn't necessarily feed on the fruit. It feeds on the plant stems and draws sap from them. This could be a disease vector, although it hasn't been shown to be, but it's certainly likely to be. But for the most part, it draws a tremendous amount of sap from the plants, weakening the plants. And I don't know if you can see there, it creates honeydew, which also inhibits photosynthesis. Here's what the adult looks like. Often you see the bright red moth-like image where the wings are spread. You're not likely to see that. What you're more likely to see is, in the adult version, is this, where the forewings are or kind of trans. You can see the reddish hind wing underneath there, so it gives it kind of a pink hue. It's a very beautiful insect, but horribly destructive. And they're not this large. They're about half an inch or so. Going from the adult life stage, they'll hatch out. Well, they'll lay eggs in the fall up until the first hard frost. The adults are present. So the adults will emerge beginning in July. They'll be present till the first hard frost, depending on where you are in the region for that. Towards the end of the fall, they'll start laying eggs. Most of the eggs will be covered with this white, grayish kind of putty substance you can see on the left side there. They're not always, they only cover a percentage of the eggs. Even that mass, you can see the top edge. There's some uncovered eggs in that mass. On the right is a completely uncovered egg mass. So when you're looking for eggs, that's really what you're looking for. It can be variable. It doesn't always have that muddy, putty-like substance covering them. When the eggs start hatching out in early May, they're very, very tiny, like, think very small tick size. They're often confused as ticks when they're in their first instar. They're black and white for their first 3 instars, so they'll molt 3 times. They'll continue to be black with these little white dots. At that point, their mode of transport, since they don't have wings, is strictly hopping and walking. The 4th instar, they will have red wing pads or some red coloration to the back of their torso. Again, no wings, but they have that reddish color. That's typically, by that point, they're a little bit larger, a little smaller than a dime, and people will start to notice that because of the very striking color. And then around this time of year, you could still see some of those, but beginning next month, they'll start mating and start the egg cycle again. Some of the other signs you might see is sap oozing from the tree or plants. You'll see fungal mats growing at the base of trees where the sap is collected, and
The video is off.
and then also you'll see masses of adults collecting around the trunk of trees, as you can see here on this Atlantis tree. And you can see the fungal mat forming at the base there. Black sooty mold, as you saw earlier, will coat anything underneath the plant, as the honeydew, which is the sap and excrement from the juveniles and adults. Due to the high volume of insects, there's a tremendous amount of honeydew produced, and it will literally coat anything under it. It'll be as if it's raining on a bright sunny day. And then the black sooty mold will grow on that honeydew. Here you can get a little bit of better view of what the stages look like. You can see the adult is a little bit smaller than a quarter, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, but not any larger than that. The 4th instar nymph there is really striking with the red wing pads. And then you can see the adult there on looks like a red maple. When looking for egg masses, they'll lay on any flat surface. They prefer the underside of things. You can see this picnic table that was upturned, and on the underside you can see several egg masses. There looks like 6 or 7. Looks like 7 or 8 egg masses there on the underside of that picnic table. Undersides of branches, anything that's not moving, any flat surface really. They're attracted to rusty metal. I'll get into that a little more later. But again, they will lay eggs pretty much anywhere on any flat surface, but they prefer the undersides of objects. And they don't always have the gray kind of putty-like waxy substance that they coat the eggs with. As you can see on the right, you can see 2 egg masses there that are not covered. A little close up, it looks almost like a scale insect. It can easily be confused sometimes, the uncovered egg masses. And then a freshly laid egg mass will have that glossy putty-like substance, but within a few days it starts to crack and dry out, and it loses that glossiness and it becomes more dull. Very similar to gypsy moth egg mass. Here's a little graphic on the timeline as far as what life stage is available when. As you can see right now, we're kind of in that transition zone, or about to be in that transition zone between the 4th instar and then the adults. Most of the older instars, the older nymphs will start to mature into adults, and as the adults probably into October, November, even as late as December, they'll continue to mate and be present. Once we have those first heavy frosts, the adults will disappear, and then we're back to the egg stage. As I mentioned earlier, the preferred host is Atlantis, or tree of heaven. The young nymphs will also congregate and attack black walnut. They'll actually prefer black walnut over Atlantis. At the younger nymph stage, the black and white, the first 3 instars. And then they'll also migrate to hops and grapes as well. The adults are also found on grapes and hops. As I mentioned earlier, some of the crops that we're concerned about are, apple, maple, particularly for not just for logging, but also for maple syrup production. Birch, sycamore, willow, staghorn, sumac, which is often confused with Ailanthus. So if you come across, the most common things that look like Ailanthus or black walnut and staghorn sumac, they could all be hosts for spotted lanternfly. But Ailanthus being the primary host, one way to look at their compound pinnate leaves is looking at the base of the leaf. You can see here where the 2 red circles are. They have a little notch or a little thumb at the base of their leaf. The compound leaves from walnut and sumac will not have that. The photo on the left of the mature tree there, you can see the seed pods, the samaras on the tree of heaven. Walnut will not have that, neither will sumac. Sumac will have a very upright seed pod. As far as survey, multiple methods are being used. Several different types of sticky bands. Here you can see the bug barrier type. This prevents bycatch from avian and mammalian, critters getting in there and getting stuck to the tape. Visual survey is still primary. We also have used canines, thanks to your neighbors up there in Lower Hudson Prism. And also DEC has been doing some environmental DNA sampling, but I think that's on a very limited basis. One of the new traps we're using is this bag trap. I apologize for the poor photo, but basically you can see it's a screen type bag that tapers to a funnel in one corner, and that funnel ends in a clear plastic bag. The clear plastic bag at the top will actually fill completely with nymphs or adults when it's working properly, and then that bag can be taken off, changed out, and disposed of. You can see the zip tie holding the bag to the neck of the trap there. So basically the insects will crawl up the tree trunk into the bag. They will kind of funnel themselves into the bag, and then won't be able to exit the bag at that point. So these traps were developed, I believe, in Pennsylvania, and were adapted from other insect traps. And we're now deploying some of these in New York. Survey grids. We're continuing to survey. We've broken up New York State into 1 kilometer grids. So when we talk about survey grids, they're 1 kilometer areas. For detection survey, we're doing 10 host locations per grid. For delimitation survey, we're surveying all of the hosts within a grid. Trapping is also being conducted within these gridded areas. And reports from the public are key. They're continuing to come in from multiple locations in the lower New York area, from anywhere from Long Island all the way up to the Hudson Valley, up where, kind of the southern reaches of CRISP. But so we're following up on those as best as we can, as quickly as we can. What the surveyors are really looking for, you can see here this covered egg mass, how it blends in very, very easily on this Ailanthus sapling. Ailanthus bark almost looks like the skin of a cantaloupe, and the coloring is very much the same as the egg masses, especially when the egg masses start to age. You can see this one's a little bit more aged, doesn't have that glossy covering, it's just kind of faded and mute. Very difficult to visually spot, especially if it's further up in the canopy. And then to the lower right of the adult female there, you can see she was starting to lay some egg masses and then moved on. Typically there's 60 or so eggs in the mass, but she can leave, partial egg masses, and it's not always a complete job. One of the things we're most concerned about is unintended transport, human-hated traffic. They can fly. They're really not the best flyers, but they can travel great distances as egg masses, as you can see here on the back of this tractor trailer truck. Again, on the underside and attracted to rusty metal. They really, really like laying egg masses on rusty metal, but really any flat surface. Here you can see the adult on the left on the door pillar of this pickup truck. If that door was open, you could easily, or even it looks like the window, driver window is actually open. They could very easily just fly inside, hitchhike, and then exit the vehicle at a new destination. And that's really how these are going to spread the easiest way. Some of the things we're doing is we've enacted a external quarantine. So any of the known quarantine areas outside of New York State. You have to have a permit to transport materials from those locations to New York. Here's an example of one of the older permits. Now they've gone to paper cards. Some of them are actually still using stickers. But New York State will accept any of the other states' permit systems, but we prefer the one from Pennsylvania. It's kind of like the gold standard. They offer a 2-hour free SLF training, permit training. It's a very good training, and it's free. Here's a good shot of one of the detector dogs. You can see the dead spotted lanternfly in the grill here that the dog picked up. You know, the dogs have been proven to be better at detecting spotted lanternfly than we have, than you know, visual survey by humans. Here, the photo on the left was done during a checkpoint stop that we had. You can see the Pennsylvania license plate on the vehicle there. So they were hauling cargo from a quarantine area in Pennsylvania into New York, and they must have hit this spotted lanternfly. And that's what the dog, I believe that's Dia, and that's not Dia. That's the other one, I think. But the dogs are much easier and much better at detecting spotted lanternfly than we are. So as you've probably seen in the news recently with the press releases, spotted lanternfly has been confirmed on Staten Island at 3 locations. You can see the red dots. So it's kind of spread across the width and breadth of Staten Island. We're continuing to survey on Staten Island and also in the surrounding areas. You can see some of the shaded areas. Those are the targeted areas. As of right now, these are the only confirmed, verified, official confirmed sites in New York. So what's significant is there were multiple life stages and multiple adults in one location versus in the past where we've only had single detections at a single site. Here is the most updated map. I had to do this at the end of the day yesterday. So I believe they modify this to include one county in Maryland, to update the one county in Maryland. But you can see that blue shaded area there between Long Island and New Jersey. That would be Staten Island. So that's the most significant change for us here in New York versus the purple dots that we've had scattered throughout the state. So I'm going to move on to the unsolicited seeds. You may have seen in the news, or you may have received packages of seeds yourself. The USDA estimates about 2 million packets of unsolicited seed were shipped to the U.S. All 50 states have been involved. People often say that they're seeds from China. They're not just from China. There are 7 different countries that I'm aware of, and two U.S. Territories as well. 1 state and 1 U.S. territory in the Pacific. So it's not just China, it's multiple areas. But these seeds are coming. Sometimes people have purchased things online, or they've purchased seeds online. They've either canceled their seed order or received their seed order, and then they continue to get unsolicited packages of seed. And it's not always seed that they've ordered. Sometimes they've ordered other items, craft items and things, clothing. And then in additional, you know, with the item or a follow-up package later on at another date, they'll receive, you know, unlabeled packages of seed. And that's the concern, is we don't know what the seed is. You can see here that, you know, the seed in this packet is quite, you know, it's packaged nicely, but we don't know what that seed is. It could be radish seeds. It could be most anything. It's not labeled. We don't know what they are. They could be invasive species, or they, you know, some of the larger seed could have fungal pathogens or bacteria or even insects, you know, harbored in the seed. It's certainly not certified seed, so there may be weed seeds with, you know, there might be multiple species of seed there. So even though what they're intending to sell might not be an invasive species, the weed seed along with it, associated with it, may be an invasive species. So what we're doing is we're collecting the seed at a central location at a USDA office in Albany. the seeds being kind of sorted out and then being sent to the plant identification station at JFK. And the botanists there are doing their best to identify the different types of seed. And they've identified about 24 types of seed. I'm sure it's higher than that. That was the information I got a couple weeks ago. So definitely multiple types of seed coming in, which is even more of a concern. But back in July, reports started coming in. Even before July, this sort of thing would happen occasionally, but it was pretty rare. But it wasn't unheard of. And then as of July 23rd, just reports came flooding in. We were getting hundreds and thousands of calls to us in the USDA. Two particular people at the USDA, their emails shut down when they had 1,000 unanswered emails. And they were just inundated with these reports. You can see here an example of the packaging also. The packaging does vary. The seeds do vary. So on the left there, just a plain old Ziploc bag. It looks almost like rotting plums or some sort of stone fruit. But you can just imagine that's not something you'd really want to be planting. You don't know what that is or what that could be harboring. And some of the seed is also, packaged more, more standard way, I guess. But again, no identification to what the seeds could be, and they're still quite large. Some of the seed is very tiny. I've blocked out. Sorry about the ovals there, but I've blocked out the shipping, the personally identifiable information. But some of these seeds look almost like seems to be possibly sunflowers. But what you can see is there's at least 2 different contaminants in that package of seed. Some of it may be chaff, but some of it may be another type of seed. I don't know if you can see my cursor. This seed is not the same as the others, and then we don't know what this item is here. So that's the sort of thing that we're concerned with. And again, the packaging on the seed is different. The type of envelope, this is a paper envelope versus the foil ones. Here's another paper envelope. Sometimes
we can see your cursor, Tom. Yes.
Thank you. Sometimes they put in other items, little trinket items, this little cell phone kickstand sort of thing, bracelets, things like that. And I don't know if you could see it on the package. They're often marked untracked, but a lot of times, you can't see it in this labeling. A lot of times they're not labeled as seed. They're labeled as, many of them are labeled as jewelry, or some, it would be like sunflower earrings or sunflower bracelet. Sometimes they were labeled as wire connectors or spare parts. They do that to kind of bypass the normal Customs and Border Protection agricultural inspection. Here's one of the plastic or foil packs. These are more common, but they can also come in these brown paper envelopes. And again, this looks like some sort of cucurbit or melon seed. There's quite a lot of variability in the seed, and that's really what I was trying to demonstrate here. Basically, the message that we've been giving them is this exact verbiage here, but the important take-home is highlighted there, that if anyone does receive these seeds, that they are to send them to he's a PPQ officer, or actually a FITCO, which is a plant health interdiction compliance officer. So that he's kind of they deal with smuggling and interdiction issues, and they also deal with plant health issues. But he's a USDA officer based in Albany, at the Albany State Plant Health Director Office. And he's the one managing all these seeds that are coming in. I wish him well, because he's going to have his hands full with the volume of seed coming in. But what we think it is a brushing scam. So they're trying to get, customers, false customer reviews to boost their sales on their online websites, to get their little online stores more visibility online, by kind of bribing people with free items, whether it's a free cell phone kickstand or free seed. It seems like people that ordered seed online were definitely targeted with the seed, but not always. So I've shared this with all the prisms, and John was great in getting it out. But this address is really where we wanted to collect the seed so we can identify it, and then also we're using the packaging. The original packaging is important too for the investigation, because we can see what ports of entry they're coming in, and then target those to kind of tighten up the import, the distribution of these seeds. There has been definitely a drop in volume, so that's really been a huge help, is the public reporting of these things. I'll move on to Asian giant hornets. Some people have another name for these that I won't mention. The only thing that they're going to murder is honeybees. They're a pest of honeybees, just like any other stinging insect. They can be harmful to humans. They do have a tremendous volume of venom. They have a tremendous pressure of venom, but your chances of being stung by an Asian giant hornet are dramatically lower than being stung by a European honeybee. So these are not found in New York as of yet. We've had well over 800 reports. None have been positive. They're, like as I said, they're a pest of honeybees. There is a slight human health risk. I'm not trying to downplay that really, but it's really a threat for honeybees. We have many resident lookalikes. Some of them are native, some of them are imports, like European hornets. Early in the season, many European hornets were being reported. Currently, the two things we're seeing the most are pigeon tremix or tremix wood wasp, and also the most popular right now is cicada killers, eastern cicada killers, which are pretty harmless to humans. But people see something that's large and bee-like, and they panic. Where it's native to is Central Asia. It really doesn't like cold or hot climates, so it likes the mountain regions of Central Asia. You can see many dots there around Korea and Japan, but there are also other areas. In the United States, the far left corner of the U.S. are the only reports where Asian giant hornets have been found. On the Canadian side, just above that green bar there, there's also been some reports in Canada. That's where it was first found in the environment in the United States, in North America. It's been detected before in the U.S. Even as early as 2016, a nest was smuggled in and detected at the Sacramento airport by Customs and Border Protection agents, and that was detected and destroyed. That was being brought in. It's an Asian delicacy. The larva is. It's not the first time it's been detected in North America, but it's the first time it's been detected in the environment. Back in April of last year, a related Vespa species was reported in BC. It was originally thought to be Asian giant hornet, but it was not. A month later, a dead Asian giant hornet was found in Langley, British Columbia, Canada, which is right here on the border. In 2019, 3 more were found a little bit further west near Nanaimo, and the nest was located and destroyed. I have some photos of parts of the nest later. One hornet was then found. This would be the first one in the U.S. One dead hornet was found on the ground in Blaine, Washington, which is right here on the Canadian border. I mean, you couldn't get any closer to the Canadian border without venturing over the line. I've been up there. Blaine is a border town. It's a border crossing. It's a very busy port for logs and lumber, particularly logs. But other goods also transport, are moved back and forth between Saddle and Victoria. It's a very busy international trade route. Another dead worker was found later that year in October. Again, no live insects in the U.S. It was another Asian giant hornet was detected in White Rock, Canada. In the end of that year, one more dead worker was found again in Blaine, Washington, in December. And I first started getting calls and questions about this back in December. It was just 2 or 3 questions, nothing nothing overwhelming. And then during COVID, I think someone got bored and rebranded Asian giant hornets, which is the accepted, commonly used common name for Vespa mandarinia. Someone started calling them murder hornets, and it blew up on social media, and people were really panicked and you know, playing on people's fears. And that coincided with a detection in May of one dead mated queen found in Custer, Washington. Custer is right here. This orange dot here is Custer. So with that, when that was found, survey continued in the area. June 6th, one queen was found in Bellingham, which is down a little bit further. It looks like quite a distance, but you're really zoomed in quite far. Bellingham to Custer to Birch Bay, which is this other larger star here. Birch Bay to Bellingham is maybe a 10-minute drive. It's very close. It's a somewhat rural area, but there's some retirement communities around Birch Bay. Bellingham is just kind of a commuter town, border town. A lot of people commute to Seattle for work or to Canada. Again, in July, an unmated queen was trapped in Birch Bay, which is this location here, directly west of Bellingham. And that was the first time that an Asian giant hornet was trapped in the U.S. So it proved that the trapping does work. 2 more additional insects have been trapped since then. One again in Custer here, where it's been found before. It was a male this time. And then a worker, a second one, a worker was detected in Birch Bay. The day before that was trapped. An unknown, we don't know whether it was a worker or a queen. I think it was destroyed. But it wasn't destroyed enough to identify it as an Asian giant hornet. But another one was found the day before in Birch Bay. So the life cycle, starting in January, the mated queens will overwinter in kind of nest cavities, in the ground, in soil, in piles of wood, anywhere where they can kind of burrow in and shelter for the winter. In the spring, they'll start to emerge and form a colony. The unmated queens will kind of start eating sap from trees to get some protein. As the colony grows, the workers will assume most of the tasks, and the unmated queens will start to die off. The queens will start to emerge, and then they'll start to mate. Occasionally, they'll prey on beehives at that point, but it's kind of rare. Mostly, what they'll do is they'll just snatch insects out of the air, single adults, and they won't really target the colonies. Once the Asian giant hornet colony matures, which is below ground, by the way, once they reach maximum size, they'll start to produce males and young queens. At that point, their feeding behavior will change, and they'll switch to a group predation on honeybee colonies. I'll get into that in a little bit. That starts the late summer, early fall. And what they're doing is they're getting a protein, a higher protein, diet that they're feeding their mated queens and then the larvae. So the virgin queens will emerge and they'll mate. And again, the mated and unmated queens will overwinter. So that's a kind of a simplified life cycle. It's a little more complicated than some insects. The feeding and foraging. Once the queens emerge, they'll feed on carbohydrates, mostly sap. They prefer oaks. So they'll have they'll kind of rasp at the bark of a limb on an oak, and then they'll take a sap feeding. Workers will acquire protein from insects and from larvae. They'll prefer scarab beetles and longhorn beetles over other insects, but they will target honeybees as well. They're just kind of opportunistic. Here you can see an adult Asian giant hornet feeding on a honeybee. Gives you an idea of the proportions also. One thing to notice is the giant head, the size of the head and the coloring of the head. It looks almost like a Lego person, like a bright yellow round head. Very distinctive compared to the other insects we have here in North America. What they'll do in that case is that they'll not just carry the whole insect back, but they'll take the wings and legs and parts that are low in protein and discard those. They'll chew up the torso and they'll make it into like a little meatball, and they'll fly those little meatballs back to the colony. Here you can see them feeding on oaks. Here are some of the areas where they've rasped, and they're feeding on the sap flow from these areas. You can see this very distinct banding where it's very solid, crisp lines. There's no bleeding into the other areas. There's no little loops of yellow into the black. Very straight lines. And again, this cartoonish, very large head, where the head is actually larger than the torso. So that the head is wider than the torso is another indicator that it's another ID method. And also this bright yellow-orange color. So their attack phase in hunting, they'll locate bees and other insects throughout the season, as I mentioned, and they'll chew them up and mix them with an excretion from their abdomen. They'll create these little meatballs. They'll take those protein meals back to the nest and feed those to the brood, brood being the larvae and the queen as well. They'll do this in single, or maybe a couple hornets will mark a colony. What they'll do is, when they find a bee colony, what they could do, and they don't always do this, but what they could do is one or a few hornets will mark it with a locator hormone so that they can return to that location to engage in their second phase of the attack, which is the slaughter phase. This is what gives them their nickname, murder hornets. 2 to 50 Asian giant hornets. You can see 3 of these here. Again, it looks like a cartoon, but because the head is so large compared to the body, they really look like Lego people heads to me. But they'll stage themselves outside of a bee colony until that they absorb some of the pheromone smell from the bee colony, and they're less likely to be detected when they enter. So these 2 to 50 insects will invade the colony, and within a very short period of time, within a few hours, they can destroy 30 to 50,000 adult honeybees. So a typical honey colony, a managed European honey colony with 10 frames and 2 deeps, is about 60,000 bees. So approximately 30,000 per box, and typical colonies would have at least 2 boxes. So they can destroy an entire bee colony within just a few hours. That's one of the reasons why we're so concerned, the beekeepers in New York State and the U.S. in general. They'll aggressively defend this food source at this time. This is when they become aggressive towards people. Generally, they're just totally disinterested in people. But when it comes to defending either their nest or this particular food source in the fall, they can become aggressive at that point. During the occupation phase, they'll actually occupy that. Once they decapitate and discard all those honeybees, they abandon the meatballing stage, and they just kill all the adults at that point. Really what they're looking for is the larva. This is Asian giant hornet larva, not honeybee larva, but it's very similar, just different scale. So the honeybee larva is really the food source that they're looking for, and they'll aggressively defend that. So they'll occupy a honeybee colony once they've taken it over. They don't just kill it and move on. They'll kill it and occupy it until their food source has been exhausted. This is part of the nest that was detected in Nanaimo, Canada. This is what was removed. It's almost like a cardboard paper mache honeycomb. And I don't have the video of it, but what's very interesting is when he's holding this here, when the larvae are hungry, they rasp against the side of the paper, It's almost like someone taking their fingernails and scraping it on a cardboard box or a paper bag, but amplified because of the shape of the shape of the honeycomb, and also amplified because there's so many of them doing it. It's a very eerie sound, but it's just a behavior that the larva will do when they're hungry. They'll rasp against this. It's like, feed me, feed me. So the larva meatballs that are flown back to the and the whole larva that are stolen from the honeybee colonies are flown back to the nest and then fed to this larva. It's very very unique behavior. Typical bee suits really give zero protection. If you've seen a beekeeper in their typical white protective gear, that does nothing to protect you from Asian giant hornets. You can see these two folks digging up the nest in Nanaimo. They're rubberized, very thick. Think like a very similar to a scuba diving suit. So they're padded and much thicker than a typical beekeeping suit, and much more difficult for the people in them working because of it's uncomfortable and hot. Again, I mentioned about the bee venom. So honey bee venom is more toxic, but Asian giant hornets produce 4 times the volume and 5 times the pressure of a honeybee, and they can sting multiple times. The honeybees have a sting barb stinger, so they can sting once, where wasps and hornets can sting multiple times. So you can get a tremendous volume of venom, a dose of venom, much more than you would with a honeybee, which is what makes them, so dangerous. A side-by-side comparison earlier in the season, like I said, we were getting mostly European hornets. You could see how the black kind of dips down into the yellow banding. The bands are not kind of uniform in size, and they're not clean, crisp lines. The head is dark brown, although the front of a European honeybee head is yellow. The plates around the head are yellow. The entire head is not. So this top plate is brown, where and then also the body is narrower than the head, where the European head is smaller than the body. So that's one way to determine not just the length and size and color, but the banding pattern and the size and coloration of the head. Some of the other lookalikes that we've had everything from bumblebees to hummingbirds to hummingbird moths to mole crickets, hoverflies. We literally had somebody report a hummingbird. So it just, there's quite variability in what they could be, but anything that's big and yellow and flies, yellow and black, they're assuming that it's a honeybee. Quite a few ground wasps have been reported as well, just because they're insects that are living in the ground, and people know that Asian giant hornets nest in the ground, but they're not anywhere near as dangerous, and they're not as damaging. They're usually pretty innocuous. But cicada killers and European hornets were by far the majority of the reports that we're getting, and you can see the differences here in the lines on the abdomen and the coloration of the head. You can see how small these heads are compared to their bodies. If you do find spotted lanternfly in New York State, the reporting address has not changed in about a year. It's still reporting it to the Ag and Markets website there. If you do come across Asian giant hornets, you can also contact us through our Asian giant hornet link on our website. There's some reporting information. Unsolicited seed, as I mentioned earlier, I know Crisp has sent it out, as well as the other prisms, but this address here is where you would send unsolicited seed. If you have any other questions, you can always email me or give me a call. Email is probably best because I'm dealing with a lot of things, especially spotted lanternfly right now. Does anyone have any questions?
That's awesome, Tom. That's a lot of great information. Really appreciate it. Does anybody have a quick question?
Yeah, real quick, Tom, if we're getting Asian giant hornet reports that we can pretty clearly tell are either whatever look-alike they are, do you still want to see those, or is there really no point in sending those along?
I'll leave that up to you. If you think it's something, you know, that maybe could be, yes, send it on to us. We would like to keep track of how many of these are being reported. But there's, I mean, Cornell Crawford Extension offices, New York State DEC, parks, we're all kind of responding to this as best as we can. There's no way that myself and the state apiculturist can respond to all their inquiries for Asian giant hornets. So we do appreciate everyone's help, whether it's New York City Parks, New York City DEP, or any other agency. But the idea is to be consistent in messaging. I have some outreach material I can send if you need it. There's a pest alert that I put together. And then also we have like some look-alike documents that we've borrowed from other locations. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I've been sending the fact sheet I got, I think that you created with my responses, and I can batch them all up if you want to track numbers, if that's helpful.
Yeah. If you could if you keep just a running tally, you can let me know how many, and then I can add that in our reporting, just so we have an idea of how many of these reports are really coming in.
Yeah, I think I've gotten about a dozen.
Yeah. Oh, that's we've had I did 13 this morning. And I still have 2 more emails to get through. But we've had 818 or 828 somewhere on there so far.
So I'll read. There's a question from Chris Gilbert in the chat box. Could Asian giant hornet spread oak diseases as they feed on sap, sudden oak death, or oak wilt?
I think that's unknown, just because there's not enough known about this species. You know, it's very limited in its range in Washington State and Canada. I don't believe they have oak wilt in those locations. If it was here in New York, it possibly could, but I wouldn't, you know, it could be a vector, you know, it's going to feed on one tree and then move to another. So I guess theoretically it would be possible that can happen, but there's no research that I know of, especially in North America, certainly, that would show that to be the case.
Okay. I'd like, right now, I'd like to move on the agenda. If people have questions, maybe you could hold them to the end. Would you be able to hang on, Tom, till the end of the meeting? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they can also email me.
Yeah, great. Okay, let's do that. And thanks again, Tom. That was a great presentation. That's a lot of information, and I learned a lot about Asian giant hornets, especially, and it's good that we got updates on Staten Island and what's going on there, and the unsolicited seed packets I hadn't heard about for a few weeks, so it's great to learn more about what's going on with that right now. So next on the agenda, we have Meredith. She's going to give us an update on the glyphosate ban on state land. Hey, Meredith.
Sure. Hey, how's it going? So just a quick update. Nothing is finalized right now, but we do have information that came out recently on new legislation that's on the governor's desk right now for signature. And the specific language that went through for any state department, agency, public benefit corporation, or any pesticide applicator employed thereby as a contractor or subcontractor to apply glyphosate on state property. Sorry, I'm missing some of the language. So it's prohibiting the use of glyphosate on state property, and it's set to take effect December 31st, 2021. And so we're waiting to see what happens if Governor Cuomo signs that, and then trying to figure out what the repercussions are going to be. Preliminarily, I've had conversations with Matt Brinko with New York State Parks. They're looking into what that's going to mean for them, looking into alternative pesticide products that they can use on state parks. Chris Gilbert mentioned that he's only just starting to look into this right now. There's not a lot known for them, and so this is going to come up. I think Matt Brinko will bring it up at the next Invasive Species Council meeting. Tom might know more about that, but at this point, we don't know for sure what's going to happen, but there seems to be a lot of rumors and interest in glyphosate bans at various levels throughout government. So it seems prudent to start looking into alternatives. And so for DEP, we're not certain what's going to happen for city limits prohibitions on glyphosate use. And so we're beginning to look into alternative products that are safe for use around water, which is our main concern. And some of the glyphosate alternatives you might be aware are not safe for use near water, unfortunately. So we're going to begin looking into that. And I'd be happy to facilitate further discussions and sharing of resources if other groups are interested in looking into these alternatives. Connor mentioned that there is a lot of information out there for the school grounds bans, but those tend to be more looking at organic products, and we're not necessarily looking in that direction, but we would consider any and all possible alternatives. So if anyone is interested in discussing this more with a small group, I'd be happy to get in touch with you. If you want to contact John, and he can facilitate us getting together some sort of Zoom discussion in the future. And I will definitely make sure to keep everyone posted if we do hear that the governor has signed this, what the next steps are going to be. So happy to facilitate that. And just another quick update from DEP, we did have the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine did a review of the watershed protection programs that we have. This is the first comprehensive review in 20 years since watershed protection programs began. And that report is now available on their website. It's nationalacademies.org, I believe. I can send John the link also that can go out in the meeting minutes for this.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone's been interested in getting that document, it is 420 some odd pages, not a light. So if you're interested, you can skip right to, I believe it's chapter 10, which covers invasive species. And the report just generally recommends better coordination with PRISMs, and it's recommending clarifying the roles of DEP with PRISMs as well as other state agencies working on invasive species. So that is what the Academy's recommended, and DEP will be discussing it internally, how or might not implement any changes to address that, and then we'll be reaching out for stakeholder response, and that'll be happening sometime in October-ish. So I will keep everyone in the loop on that as well. That's it for me.
Great, thanks. Yeah, we could share that information around either with the minutes or beforehand. Andy, are you still on? I'm going to move on to Andy Reinman to talk about the remote sensing for monitoring hemlock. Did you have some slides you wanted to share, Andy?
Yeah, I have a couple of slides that are pretty similar to what I showed in the spring, but sort of serve as, like, I guess, a little bit of a reminder of what we're working on, and a slight little call for help at the end. So let me just share my screen here. Okay, you see the main slide?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So for those of you who tuned in the spring and maybe saw the talk I gave then, my PhD student Kelsey Parker and I are working with John and the Catskill Center and with some funding through the Carey Institute to sort of develop a mapping / monitoring product for looking at hemlock decline associated with hemlock woolly delgid for the Catskills. And this is kind of it's a remote sensing approach that is utilizing freely available products. So as a little bit of a recap of what we're doing here, basically the idea is to leverage images from NASA's Landsat satellite, which there's been different versions of it kind of flying around in orbit or we can get data since the early 1980s. It collects data on a 30-meter spatial resolution, so that's about as fine a scale as we can get using this product to sort of map changes in things like forest health. It passes the same point every 16 days. And as I mentioned, we can look at data from the 1980s to present. This allows us to kind of stitch together a time series of sort of this spatial and temporal patterns in hemlock decline across the Catskills. And some of the metrics that we're using are really these different measurements of kind of greenness of the forest canopy. So one of the ones that are most commonly used is a metric called the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. This and another metrics called the Enhanced Vegetation Index. They're basically capturing how much foliage or chlorophyll content there might be within a pixel. And because with many pests that impair the health of trees, over time, there's a decline in leaf area, there's a decline in chlorophyll content in the leaves, and that's what we're using to sort of detect the distribution and sort of rate, the spatial distribution and then the rate of decline of these hemlock stands. And so here's sort of where we're focusing in the Catskills. We're also doing some similar work in southern New York, looking at both hemlock woolly delgid and other invasive species. So we're going to use this project to try and bridge these two different spatial components of New York. And to give you an idea sort of how this works, first we need to figure out where there are hemlock stands. And so any existing maps delineating hemlock forest makes that part of the project a lot easier and a lot more reliable. But in the absence of those sorts of data, we can take advantage of the fact that most of our landscape is really deciduous forests, and hemlock are largely the only conifers that will occupy large expanses of the landscape and form these pure stands. Of course, there's areas where you might have white pine or higher elevation areas with spruce, but we can take sort of a modeling approach to kind of figure out where we might have hemlock versus other coniferous forests. But using a remote sensing approach, basically what this looks like is if we kind of look at the phenological signal of these trees and look at the difference in sort of how green a particular pixel is between the winter and the summer, that amplitude does a pretty good job of helping us to figure out where we have conifer forests, where we have deciduous forests, and sort of things in between. This is an image from a colleague of mine, a paper they put out in 2013, where they sort of demonstrate this. And you can see the true color image on the left, where they have a hemlock forest here with the blue line next to a deciduous forest. And then on the right is a color-coded map based on how much sort of like canopy greenness changes across the year. And you can see that as an area becomes more heavily dominated by conifers, that amplitude decreases compared to an area dominated by deciduous trees that have a really large amplitude. So this is a way that we can sort of in an automated way start to pick out where we might have conifer dominated or mixed forests across the landscape. And then we can use this and these changes in greenness over time to sort of pluck out hemlock stands that might be in states of decline. So here's a map using data from CRISP field plots where they've identified both healthy hemlock stands and declining stands. And we're able to use this satellite imagery to sort of contrast how green these forests are. In this case, we're just looking at a binary sort of time slice here in 2005 and 2015. And you can see the healthy stand toward the bottom of the image. You don't really see much of a change in greenness over that time. They stay pretty green in both periods, while that declining stand was pretty green in the first time slice, but then you can see it is quite a bit less green in the second time slice. So that would sort of like raise a red flag that we might have this stand that's in a state of decline. And just to give you a little bit more of like a spatially resolved way of how to think about this. So here's a map of the entire Catskills. And again, this is just comparing 2005 to 2015. And so it looks like from this image, oh my God, all of the Catskills are in a state of decline. But it's important to remember that there's a lot of interannual variability in how green the canopy is. That can be a function of just prevailing environmental or climate conditions. And so we get a lot of interannual variability. But what we would expect to see is that if there's a hemlock stand that's in a state of decline, we would see this temporal trajectory that doesn't follow the same interannual variations that other healthy forests nearby it might experience. And so I have on here these little black and blue blobs that indicate another example of a healthy versus a severely declining stand. And so here is using sort of Google Earth imagery to show you, visually what this stand looks like in 2005 versus 2015. The 2005 image is in a time of year when the deciduous trees aren't really leafed out, so there's a little bit difference in greenness. But if you focus in on the areas that are very clearly the conifer trees, you can see in both years they're equally green. There's not much of a difference. And when we sort of throw that into our algorithm that's sort of detecting decline, you can see that essentially that whole area sort of falls in this yellow zone, which indicates that there's not really much of a change in greenness over that time. Now, when we contrast that to a stand that we know is declining, you can see in the satellite imagery that in 2005, that hemlock forest was a pretty well intact and healthy hemlock forest. But by 2015, you can start to see these scattered dead hemlock trees throughout the stand. And what that manifests itself as is a decline in greenness that, when we throw into our algorithm, sort of highlights this stand as showing a large decline in health. And so these are two different stands, looking at them in the exact same but two different years. So we can look at that temporal trajectory, and you can see how a healthy stand and an unhealthy stand sort of contrast with one another. And so we're hoping to finish this work for the Catskills by the end of the year. I think we're mostly on track to do that. Some of the more detailed analyses may take a little bit longer, but where we are now is, so we had initially hoped to do a bit of ground truthing of some of these hemlock stands to pair with our remote sensing analyses. But Kelsey, my PhD student working on this, she lives in Queens and doesn't have a car, and so this makes getting up to the Catskills a little bit trickier. We're trying to figure out ways that maybe I can have her rent a car or something, and we can sort of drive up there separately and look at some stands. But that's going to reduce the number of times that we can get up there. So if you know of anyone or any yield plots that have been assessed for a state of hemlock decline or hemlock health in some sort of like standardized way, and you or those people that you know of might be willing to share some data about those stands, that would be really helpful as we continue to move forward to develop sort of the ground truth training data and validation data that we need to improve upon this algorithm. And like I said, we'll also move forward to do some ground truthing of our own. So anyway, reach out to us if you know of any data sets. We also will plan to, once we have all these this mapping completed, then we can start to look at temporal and spatial patterns in HWA-related decline across the Catskills. And we can also start to explore some of the ecological impacts or implications of these changes. And one of the things that we'll look at is how hemlock decline sort of changes the thermal regime or thermal dynamics forests and the landscape, what we might expect is as the hemlock trees decline, temperature will start to increase, and we'll be able to see that using remote sensing imagery. Here's a picture of Kelsey, who unfortunately couldn't join us today because the semester has started and she's taking classes. But our email address is on here, so please reach out to us if you're interested or have the capacity to help out at all. Thanks, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, maybe if we could hold questions to the end, Andy, and
Yep.
we'll move on. If somebody does have a question for Andy, they can just wait until we get through the other updates. Or if they have other information they'd like to share with Andy, then you could let them know at towards the end of the meeting. But I wanted to move on to Carrie Marshner to give an update from the Hemlock Initiative. Carrie?
Hi, thank you. Let me do that. Thanks for the opportunity to give you guys an update. I'm showing a map of the current state of HWA data in the Catskills, just the positive points. So it looks like the area within the blue line is filling in pretty well with data as we look more carefully. But that whole northwestern section, there's still not a ton of information about what's going on up there. Last winter was a relatively mild winter, and that means that this summer we're seeing pretty strong populations, which is making survey a lot easier. So this fall is going to be a great year to get out and look for HWA, I think, because there's lots and lots and lots of estimating systems right now. The COVID-19 situation did limit the amount that our biocontrol research team could get out to the Pacific Northwest, but we were still able to release over 7,000 leucopus this spring at 9 sites. 2 of those sites were in the Beaverkill, one was within the DEP watershed, and one was within the Beaverkill watershed. You guys may have already heard that there's a new find in the Adirondacks. Our director, Mark Whitmore, has been up there most of the last 3 weeks surveying with DC, trying to delineate that infestation. It was a campground on Lake George where they found the first infestation. And there are scattered infestations, light and moderate ones, along that shoreline. But DEC is going to treat in October, and we are hopeful that that infestation will be manageable. We have a staff member who's been working in the Beaverkill watershed and the surrounding areas. I wanted to show you. This is what that area looked like in 2019. These funny colored polygons are prioritization.
Hey, Carrie, do you want to go into presentation mode? So we're just seeing your slide?
I'm just afraid that.
Or are you okay doing it this way?
Yeah, then I just hang on.
Okay.
I just have to share it on the other screen.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it was working fine the way you had it before.
All right, does that look better?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
No worries. Okay, so it's a little bigger now, which should be easier. So these funny looking polygons are a prioritization effort that we did, which was strictly via remote sensing. So I just went in and outlined all of the conifers in the area and then ran them through the prioritization metric that we talked about at that HWA managers meeting earlier in the winter. And we just filled out the parts of that metric that we could do, from aerial satellites. Is it near water? Is it connected to other stands? Is it a big stand, a dense stand? And so we used what we could do from that to prioritize. This was, the red points are where we knew there were HWA before we started this project. And this is where we are at now after Kate's been there for a while. So you can see she's filled in a lot more HWA locations, which is, it's great to have that data, but it's a little disappointing to discover that there is that much HWA in what we thought was probably a pretty clean watershed. So she's going to keep working in there, and we're hoping to put together submit a grant proposal that we're going to submit to a federal program through the New York State Forester. It's going to be a private-public partnership, and it's going to be a landscape scale treatment plan for the Beaver Kill area, hoping to find some resources for the landowners there. The good news is that Kate has been working with those landowners, and several of the large landowners have decided to move forward with treatment, which is excellent. And also another piece of good news is that the owners of the Wintoon Waters, which is farther south, they have also decided to do some treatment. So we're really happy to share that news with you guys. That's all I've got.
Thanks, Carrie. Appreciate that. Yeah, again, if anybody has any questions, let's we can ask them after we have the next few updates. Next, we have Connor Young.
Hi, everyone. These will be pretty brief and didn't really warrant a PowerPoint, but I think it's no surprise that all of us have faced some unique challenges and impacts, whether direct or indirect, with COVID, and that certainly education and outreach was no exception. So I have a couple updates on our usual approach and also some of the quick transitions that we made. So usually within the CRISP region, the CCE associations collaborate towards some common goals, but we also try to be present at fairs and do outreach events like that. Obviously, none of those were possible. So as it relates to Greene County and some of those usual, I guess, annual projects that we move forward, this is just a representation of some of the things we did. Even if it's a snapshot of more focused on Greene County, it kind of does reflect what we've done region-wide. So I think to start, what was pretty incredible is the increased community inquiries that we've had. A lot of people were either working from home or in some sort of lockdown that had a tangible impact on their interest and engagement with their properties. So our community inquiries went, I wouldn't say through the roof, but definitely much higher than usual. Just for some invasive species references, our invasive species webpage, which has a lot of resources and some overview of identification fact sheets and things like that, it went up like over 1,300 visits from Q1 to Q2. So by the time March and April hit, it almost doubled. It was pretty amazing. So that was reflected also in those reaching out. People were starting gardens for the first time. They were interacting with their woods and or open spaces, whether that is streamside or more, idle vegetative, old ag fields. And so we had over 400 inquiries to our Master Gardener volunteers in our county alone. And a lot of those did have to do with tree health that we handled directly, whether it's through help and identification, but also sharing resources on how to navigate next steps. Our invasive species, awareness week, that was obviously not nearly as robust as we were hoping, given all those constraints I mentioned, but we did have somewhat of a social media post, and our total reach over that week was close to 600 direct reach people. So that included an IMAP invasives, a shout out to a webinar and training, in addition to some other things. And at the time, that was the best that was possible, but it did increase some of those inquiries for sure. Some of those requests for support. And this includes everything from plants, pests, diseases, wildlife. We had a few of the Asian giant hornet, people coming to us first, and it's pretty easy for us to direct to ag and markets, and that's the case for a lot of species like that. But most of them were not necessarily an IMAP invasive red flag. They were most of the common, not the early detection rapid response species, more of the common ones, such as jumping worm is obviously a big one for gardeners, and then other ones like emerald ash borer for forestry and logging. That's something we deal with quite a bit. We did have a couple of webinars that I thought were of interest for this group. We did one on native trees and shrubs, especially focusing on pollinators and native pollinators, to be more specific. And that had over 500 registrants, and we had 281 attendees, that's actually pretty similar. That's pretty consistent with the registration to actual attending ratio there. So that was very successful. We also did one with CCE Onondaga and the Nature Conservancy on keeping your forest healthy. It's the resilience scorecard that was developed last year. We did a webinar workshop on that. We've done other ones that all intertwine with invasive species, but they're not necessarily as directly related to ecological health like those two were. Just a couple other quick things. We did a couple of YouTube videos on what's that invasive, and the one on garlic mustard went through the roof with over 2,000 views. That's a very high number considering our other YouTube series compared to honeysuckle, which was only 237. So we're learning as we go what people really interact with virtually and what they don't. So garlic mustard was a big hit. And then three other quick things. Every year for the past couple of years, we've been working with it's the invasive species action team. It's basically the teen ambassadors that we work with students who want to engage with invasive species, and they bring that to their classrooms, and then they have like a capstone project where they present at fairs. That program was kind of stalled this year, but we have been able to continue it in some capacity, given the transition to school and a lot of that confusion and those logistics that have been being worked out. We're hoping to do a program with students this September to continue their education, and we've been engaging them over the summer, but we haven't been able to do as many of the trainings as we would have liked, but we're at least keeping it alive, which is a positive thing. One other quick thing is our Master Forest Owner volunteers and our Master Gardener volunteer programs were pretty much grounded from being able to visit the office. A lot of them have been engaged by email or phone with landowners, which is how we hear about a lot of invasive species education needs. Fortunately, Cornell has approved a training protocol for the Master Forest Owners, so we're hoping to do some of those smaller versions of them, and some virtual, but those will happen this fall, we're hoping. So that will include some invasive species refreshers, and similarly, it's the case for Master Gardeners who are on the front lines, and so we really appreciate all of their work and their due diligence when it comes to invasive species identification and those types of things. So, and just one last quick highlight is in partnership with the Watershed Ag Council, we do a monthly newsletter. It's called In These Woods, and we talk about forest management topics ranging from timber management to agroforestry and everything in between. But our September issue is dedicated fully to invasive species. So all of your updates and all the work you do, we're going to try to highlight it as much as we can because it's really great to share, and it's I don't know. So I really appreciate the meeting, John, and everyone's updates. I've learned a lot myself, and I hope to keep us going into the rest of this year, and especially have some strong momentum for 2021. So if there's anything you need, feel free to contact me at any point.
Thanks, Connor. Yeah, thanks for the updates. And this time of COVID has caused changes for all of us, but I know that it's really caused a lot of changes for cooperative extension and the work that you do, all the in-person work. We really appreciate, and we appreciate you being able to adjust to still try to get information out there and answer people's questions as they come in on invasive species. Thanks, Connor.
Absolutely.
Next, we'll move to Meg Wilkinson, who has an update from IMAPS.
Thank you, John. So I'm putting in the chat box the link for the New York IMAP website in case anyone doesn't have that handy. And I will mention just 3 things. The first is also, yes, as everyone mentioned, COVID and stay at home and work from home and webinars made a change in our spring as well. And one of the results of that is that on the New York IMAP website, there are numerous links for many different trainings that you can watch at your leisure for the IMAP mobile app, as well as other angles of IMAP. The second thing I'll mention is this will be the first year with the 2020-2021 season of Prism calls. We will be doing, I think we got close to everyone last year, but this time we will be doing an IMAP webinar of some kind on the same Wednesday as the Prism calls. So I know a lot of you attend they're usually the 4th Wednesday of the month, Prism calls at 11. And at 1 o'clock on the same day, we will be offering IMAP webinars. So if there's anything that you would like to have included in that series of 9 presentations, please email the IMAP box and we'll add it to the request list. Some of the topics requested already are, there's a new powerful report tool in IMAP, and you can now, there's ways to do end of season reports for projects and things like that. So we'll be covering that. We'll also do another Certified Trainers Network training. So I think it was Connor, you mentioned that you have, you're involved with some of the capstone students. Getting trained as an IMAP certified trainer has been one of the things that college students seem to enjoy. They're very tech savvy and it's something they can put on their resume. And so please draw that to their attention if that interests them. Other topics that have been requested are going over how to do custom email alerts for your county or watershed or project. So this would be a good one to let us know if you want. We did do a web map service one in the spring or sometime before, it was January or February of this year. If people would like to have another one and maybe showcase some of the stuff they're doing with the IMAP web map service, that would be another angle of a possible presentation. And I know many of you are familiar with the species tier project, so that might be another thing that we might do an update on sometime in this Suite of 9 series. Then the third thing I just would mention is I'm sure most of you are familiar with the IMAP mobile app and have it on your phone and are submitting key species, and we have gotten some crazy key reports over the last 6 months. So first off, thank you and kudos to all of you helping with that. And if anyone is not familiar with the IMAP mobile app, this is a crazy qualified crowd. So please do check out that, and you can download it to your phone. And as I mentioned, there's webinars that cover it online. And if you have any questions, email us directly. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Meg. We'll need to end the meeting soon, but just if anybody has any questions, I know I had to delay the questions for Tom, especially if anybody has any quick question on Tom's presentation or the other updates that they want to ask now. I'll give you a second, or if you want to type it in the chat box. But otherwise, I would just want to take the opportunity to thank again Chris for the Northern Snakehead update. We've been getting a lot of inquiries about that, and it's good to get the information out there. We're trying to share it as much as we can to get people looking for Northern Snakeheads, and there's a lot of concern about the Spotted Lanternfly in Staten Island. So it's great that Tom could give us an update on that and the Asian giant hornets and the unsolicited seed packets. It's good to know what the latest is on that. So does anyone have any last minute question or anything they wanted to add to the conversation? Oh, what's your, Meg, I see you have a chat question. Did you want to ask that question?
Oh, I'm sorry, John. I figured you had the mic already. I was just going to let you
okay.
Go ahead. You have good audio quality and everything.
So I wasn't sure what you were asking. New Jersey and Spotted Lanternfly. Are you asking, is the Spotted Lanternfly in New Jersey close to Staten Island?
Thank you. That's a good point. My question is not clear.
Sorry.
No, I was wondering if Tom, I assume there's collaboration with New Jersey as well, and there's similar efforts in New Jersey. Just, you know, Staten Island is what, 5 miles from New Jersey?
Yes. So on the one slide, I'm trying to share it. Well, I can't, but so the regional IPM center map that I showed, that showed multiple states in the blue areas. The western part of New Jersey has been confirmed to have spotted lanternfly. So like all along the PA border, basically, from all the way from Delaware all the way up to one county south of the New York line, has confirmed to have spotted lanternfly. There are populations elsewhere in New Jersey that they have not confirmed. Does that answer your question? And yes, we are working with, simply with plant protection quarantine, because we cannot cross the state line without like 3 months worth of prior pre-approval to, you know, New York State employees working in New Jersey or Pennsylvania, that doesn't fly so well. But plant protection quarantine staff can cross the state lines kind of willy-nilly. So we are working very closely with staff from Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And we had several of the more seasoned spotted lanternfly surveyors from Pennsylvania and New Jersey on the ground in Staten Island and elsewhere in New York. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I think we'll need to leave it there. Thanks for that, Tom. And thank you again for Tom and Chris for your great presentations and everybody that gave updates today. There's a ton of information that was presented. I recorded this presentation, so we'll put it on the Chris website so you can look at it again. We have some tasks to do to share information around, and we'll do that to make sure that everybody gets the information that we promised to share. Again, thanks for all the great work that you all are doing. Really appreciate it, and thanks for taking this opportunity to share that, share the information that you're collecting and all the great work that you're doing. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure all the partners do. So thanks, everybody. We'll sign off, and we'll probably have our next meeting in December, I would think, and I hope to see you then if I don't see you on Zoom before. Take care.